Welcome to the gamification webinar. My name is Chelsea Dubay. I'm going to be taking you through some strategies that you can consider implementing into your online as well as face-to-face, as well as your face-to-face courses. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to log on if you're joining live, and if you are going to be watching this after the fact, make sure that you have something to take notes on, make sure you get your audio working, video working, all that good stuff before we get started. I also want to make sure that everybody has realistic expectations about the webinar. So the purpose of this webinar is to just show you some of the gamification strategies that you can implement, but also talk about reasons why you could consider implementing those strategies, as well as how to execute those strategies in D2L. It's also good to mention that factors like gamification and game-based learning, stealth assessments, all of those types of things are really great icing on the cake. They're not as great if you don't have any cake. So I always recommend, if you're approaching a course, make sure that you've taught that course a number of times before you start implementing one of these new strategies into it. You want to be comfortable with the course content. You want to have had a couple runs with the assessments that you've planned before you start integrating some of these strategies into your course. The reason I say that is gamification is really awesome, but the reality is it could go off without a hitch. Your students could love it. It could be a great experience. The flip side is it could kind of bomb at the same time. So I want to make sure that the class that you have identified, or the classes that you've identified that you may want to consider implementing some of the strategies that we're going to talk about, is a class that's pretty solid. It has a great foundation. There are no technical issues with the class. You've received positive feedback from the students, but at the heart, there's still a learning problem. So any sort of instructional design strategy that we implement into our courses, the purpose of that strategy is to solve a learning problem. So make sure that you've identified a learning problem in your course. Okay, so enough for the soapbox. Let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar, which is Gamification Strategies to Implement in Your D2L Brightspace courses. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. By the end of this workshop, what I hope to convey to you is a simple definition of gamification. Sometimes we can get confused when we talk about gamification, game-based learning, simulations, role-playing. All of these keywords get thrown around, and they're not quite as interchangeable as we may think. We also want to be able to identify the three major components within a gamification strategy. So there's three major pillars that you could consider when you're going to implement one of these strategies into your class. Then I want you to be able to identify the tools that you could use within D2L that you would need to utilize in order to embed the gamification strategies. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of some options you have to embed. And then I want to make sure that we give you all of the gamification building resources either on our website, and some of the resources I have found are on external websites. Any links that I give will be available in the chat for my live people, and also in the YouTube description field for those who are joining in after the fact. Okay, so by definition, gamification is the picking and choosing of certain elements of gameplay into a non-game scenario. So for our purposes, for classes, and specifically for online classes, gamification is using different elements of gameplay in a non-game or in a class scenario. These gameplay elements could include leaderboards. So I want you to think about some of the arcade games that you may have played in your childhood. you approach the game and you are immediately met with the leaderboard, who has scored the most points while playing the game. And that leaderboard can sometimes ignite some sort of competitive nature in us. We want to beat that high score. So you could incorporate a gameplay element of the leaderboard. You could incorporate a gameplay element such as levels. Think about, I used Mario Brothers for my theme here. Mario Brothers has several different levels of lands. There's like levels 1 through 8, and inside of those 8 lands there's at least 4 different I guess micro levels that you have to complete. So there's always some mapped out strategy to how to navigate the game. So this is the application of game elements in a non-game scenario. Now this is different than game-based learning. Game-based learning is actually playing a game that utilizes the strategies that you're hoping to teach. So for example, some popular game-based strategies in the middle school arena is to use Fortnite to talk about the build of civilizations. So game-based learning, you're actually playing the entire game. Your learning strategy is students will play the game to understand the concepts that you're hoping to transfer to them. So there's two completely different things. So gamification is the picking and choosing of certain or specific gameplay elements and then applying those elements to non-game scenarios. Game-based learning is when your entire lesson objective falls within students playing a game. Now you also have some other things to consider. You've got simulations. Simulations are your opportunity to create a safe space for students to practice the skills that they've learned. So some applicable simulations would be, in some of our nursing classes we have bedside manner. So how are you approaching the patient? How are you talking to the patient? How are you gathering information about their medical history? How are you releasing information to either the patient or the patient's family members? You could create a simulation where you as the student are coming in and based on the actions or the decisions that you've made, certain scenarios will then present to you in like a branched situation. So your answers or actions determine what displays to you next. And then you have role playing, which is, I feel like pretty self-explanatory. You and your students are assuming roles and then acting them out. It's very similar to a simulation in that it is a safe environment. You are being able to practice, but I want to make sure that you can differentiate between those things. So gamification, game-based learning, role-playing, and simulations. They're all very similar. They're all a part of that same camp of safe environment, but each of them are nuanced a bit differently. Okay, so I just went over that. So again, games are competitive environments, whereas simulations are recreated scenarios. So one of the purposes of gamification in our online class is to ignite motivation. If you see that you have the ability to maybe turn something into something more competitive, maybe you're putting your students, having them compete against each other to finish first or to build on something, or use some sort of collaborative learning technique in a way that's a little bit more non-traditional. Games also have to have a set of rules. So when you're implementing these game-based scenarios or these gamification strategies, you have to clearly define your rules, and that's where your syllabus is going to come into play. It's always best practice, if you're going to be following a gamification strategy, that you have your rules clearly defined. That's really the case for any class, especially online classes, is just clarity of information. You have to structure and present your information in a clear way. You also have to acknowledge that you are using this type of strategy in your class. You need students to be aware of what it means when you say points. Is points grades? Is levels grades? And we'll talk about what is appropriate for gamification, what's not too, because there's definitely some confusion there. Now simulations, they do also operate on a set of rules, but the the key there is it's mimicking that real world scenario. Because it's mimicking that, that's what creates a safe environment. You have a practice arena to play out different scenarios and actions. So touched on this a bit earlier, but reasons you should gamify, and I think they're all pretty obvious. Increase in motivation and engagement. So in our online classes, we are constantly battling student attention, instructor attention, and general course engagement. And that engagement could happen in 3 different channels. It could be students engaged with the instructor, students engaged with other students in the class, their peers, students engaged with the course content. How can we ensure that students have the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way? And then, if they're engaging with one another, making sure that experience is meaningful. We talk a lot about this in our course building workshops about the why of your class. Why are you including a specific reading assignment? Why are you including a specific activity or video to watch or website to review? I know that, you know, at the heart of things, you're wanting to give students information, and that's all well and good, but truly think about what is most meaningful to the student. Another reason that you could gamify is to increase your students' problem-solving skills. So oftentimes, a gamification strategy follows a storyline or a storyboard. And throughout the class, the students are having to figure out how to either progress to the next level or how to get around a certain barrier or blockade. And then, because it's in this safe environment, this is an online class, we have created these specific gamified strategies and scenarios. Students feel confident to take risk. They feel more confident to explore answering or interacting with, going back to that nursing scenario, explore interacting with a patient in a way that they may not feel comfortable with if it was a live simulation where they're interacting with a live person. Another reason would be to increase attention to detail. This is for both students and instructors. So attention to detail in online classes cannot be emphasized strongly enough. Anytime a student approaches online course content, if at any point in time there is an issue with the content, maybe a technical issue, maybe a link is broken, maybe something is not playing, or maybe something doesn't make sense, something is unclear, students tend to kind of latch on to that either issue or just problem in the course. So applying these gamification strategies as the instructor, it forces you to kind of narrow in on what you're trying to implement. This way, that attention, the attention to detail there is you are so in tune with your class that you're confident that things are going off without a hitch. Like I said before, gamification is one of those upper echelon implementations. So this is a great way for our users to kind of advance their course to the next level. Lastly, and probably most important, other than increasing engagement, is the igniting persistence in students. How do we ensure that our students persist or continue from one course to the next? How do we encourage them to persist from one assignment to the next? Maybe they received a bad grade on an assignment. How can we ignite their motivation and ignite that, and ensure that that student persists to the next activity instead of dropping off? So that student persistence is key. Students can be super motivated, instructors can be super motivated. If the persistence is not there, it's kind of all for nothing. Okay, so how do we gamify? Well, easy, just these 5 steps and then you're done. First, you have to understand the gamification concepts. We went over that in the first couple of slides of this webinar. It is so important to wrap your head around what it is you're actually wanting to implement or integrate into your class. Do you want to kind of pick and choose some elements and then pepper them throughout your course? Do you want to turn your entire course into a game or story? Do you want to create real-world scenarios that students have a way of safely expressing or exploring alternative answers and solutions? So really have a solid understanding of what you're wanting to do with your course. And then, and probably most importantly, identify the learning objectives of both your course. They should have already been established by our CPS system, handed down to you from either your dean or department chair. So what are your learning objectives for the course? What are you hoping your students walk away with? Then, to go a level deeper, what are the learning objectives of each weekly unit of instruction? So, you know, if we have a course that is modeled after weekly modules, what is each week's objective? Because at the heart of gamification, all we want to do, again, is to solve the learning problem. So the learning problem is, my students do not yet know this. So how can I get them, how can I transfer that knowledge to them? All of those gamification strategies, regardless of what you choose, should be rooted in your learning objectives. It's not something to make your class fun. It's not something to impress your colleagues or anything like that. At the heart of it, you are solving a learning problem, and you have to know what your learning objectives are. Now, after you identify the first two things, and they're the kind of the dry area to the whole gamification thing, then 3 through 5, that comes the fun part. So what's the challenge? What is your story? What is your theme? How are you going to present this to your students? And you can be as creative as possible. We have, I'll show you some examples of really awesome gamification strategies and game-based learning strategies that some other schools have implemented relatively successfully. But this is your part. So for example, there is one university who is teaching epidemiology, and their entire course is like zombie apocalypse kind of mass chaos, and they're trying to contain some sort of outbreak. So the students are assigned roles in terms of how they would play in that outbreak and containment process, and the entire course is built into that storyline. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. Building out a course that follows a storyline takes an exorbitant amount of time and attention to detail. It's not something that you can do in a day, weekend, whatever. You've really got to map out and make sure that everything is kind of meshed together. It's just like writing a novel. You got to pick out your characters, you got to pick out your plot, you got to pick out your purpose, all that stuff. So after you've identified what's your challenge, are you going to do a story? Is there a theme? Is there some sort of naming convention you're going to use? Then you get to really outline that process. So what do I want my student to experience? And then step by step, either week by week or assessment by assessment, plan out what and how your story is going to play out. And then you've got to actually do the work. This was all kind of exploratory, and that, yeah, you can think about this, jot down some notes, blah, blah, blah. But now how do you make it work? We have to identify the necessary scaffolding. So scaffolding is support that ensures that your course content is clear. Support that ensures that your assignments are in working order, that your students have enough information in order to complete the assignment successfully. That's all scaffolding means. So you've got to identify the activities that you're going to roll out, identify any sort of content elements that you have to place in there, create those scenarios. So if you've got a discussion board that's going to be gamified, if you have a quiz that's going to be gamified, if you've got something else, and then, as always, confirm that alignment. Alignment means I can trace my activity, content, whatever it is, back to my specific learning objective. Okay, so there's a couple of components of gamification that you could think about. First, you have achievements, badges. So these are, so any sort of achievement or badge is your opportunity to give your students a physical indicator that they have either completed something or achieved something. Now, when you're talking about an achievement or a badge, make sure, and this is crucial, make sure that you're not kind of double dipping into your class. And what I mean by that is graded elements cannot or cannot is the wrong word. Graded elements are not necessarily gamified elements. Okay, so your students are already receiving a grade for those required assignments. Gamification asks you to give them other things to do that aren't necessarily for a grade. It could be a bonus grade, it could be bonus points or extra credit in some level. But keep in mind that your students are already receiving some feedback on those graded elements. They're already receiving points, aka grades for them. So giving them a badge as well as points is a bit redundant. So badging and achievement notification or indicators, that's when students have reached a certain point. So maybe they've achieved something other than turning in a graded assignment. That's what they have to do anyways. Okay. Then you have levels. Levels are the echelons or stages in your course. So it could be that you don't, or you are following a weekly module structure, but every fourth module, students have the opportunity to progress to the next level in your course. And what does level mean? Maybe level means that they get extensions on their homework. Maybe level means that they get bonus points for this, that, or the other. Maybe level means that they get to pass on an assignment. You get to determine all of these things, but make your levels advantageous. Like, why should the student do it? If that why is not clearly defined, it's possible your students won't explore that opportunity at all. Points, and I mentioned this briefly, points are grades. Okay, so you want to make sure that, again, I can't stress this enough, make sure that you're not basically reinventing your gradebook. Now, if you are using your graded items as your gamification, that's essentially saying that you're gamifying the class in that you're changing your naming conventions. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like too. We then have what some people call Easter eggs. So this is a fun way to deposit some of these gamification strategies in your course. Easter eggs are hidden elements in your course. So students could collect the hidden elements in your course and then receive either bonus points or some sort of other goal or accolade in your course. So Easter eggs could take the form of code words or pop-ups in your lecture videos that students complete. Maybe you have placed different codes or passcodes into your lecture presentation slides or your lecture notes, your weekly module objectives, and then inside of that element, either inside your lecture video or something else, is that password. The password unlocks the quiz for the student. So you could embed your password to your exam into your lecture content. Your students would have to watch your lecture content and either solve the riddle or something in order to gain access to your quiz. So again, encouraging them to persist through the lecture content so that they can get to the assessment. And then you have leaderboards. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the webinar. Leaderboards is a visual indicator of rank. This is going to ignite some of those competitive influences within your class list. So, and this is not going to apply to everybody, and it's okay if it doesn't, but some students really thrive off of that competition. So just seeing that they're not number one or seeing that they're close to this level is encouraging and motivating for them to progress to either or improve to the next level, to get to that or to reach that next achievement, to get those next bonus points. So these are all kind of essentially incentivizing your course by using the leaderboard, showing the students or displaying to the students their rank in the course, and having the opportunity for students to catch up. Depositing information and elements into your course so that they can hunt and find it, giving them an objective after they have found that element, and then rewarding them or acknowledging them by giving them either a level progression, an achievement, or a badge. So all of those things are possible. Okay. Learning objectives. Okay, so we talk a lot about learning objectives in some of our course building workshops. And I cannot stress the importance of it. We always like to say that content in your course should have a good fit purpose home. Okay, so what I mean by that is every single element that you place into your course, if you are giving your students a link to an external website, what are they going to do there? Why does it matter? What would they do, or how would it impact them if they didn't even click on the link? What do they do once they get there? And then afterwards, how are they bringing back that information? Like, it just exposing students to information just for their own good is not really good enough anymore. Students need to understand why. And these learning objectives give them clear and measurable information that they can take back and apply to the content. So as the instructor, if I say, this week we are going to work on descriptive statistics, we're going to be able to identify variables, we're going to be able to identify the type or range or scale of the variable, we're going to figure out or determine whether or not it's qualitative or quantitative. We can tell them specifically our intention of what they should learn. And then once we're getting into the course, we'll give them information that says, this website, by reading this website, it will help you understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative variables. So that when you're performing academic research or whatever else, you're more informed as you're going to either set up your questionnaire, your survey, your interview, whatever else that you're doing. Ensuring that they're clear and measurable is one thing, but also that they're appropriate for the level of student that you're teaching. So in our office, we work with courses from the 1,000 level to the 7,000 level. And in that range of courses, it's our expectation that the students are continuously being approached with those higher levels of thinking. How do we ensure that the purpose of our material aligns with those higher levels of thinking and knowing? We can rest on Bloom's taxonomy, so those list of action verbs that help us create learning objectives that help support that our module encourages higher levels of thinking and knowing. If we have a 6,000 or 7,000 level course that is simply something like define, identify, some of those lower levels of thinking and learning, the student may be at a disadvantage when they then have to go to apply that information, because application of knowledge is on a higher level than identifying or defining. If you need help with creating learning objectives, creating clear, measurable learning objectives that use higher levels of thinking according to Bloom's taxonomy, Stephanie Tweed, Dr. Tweed in our office is incredible with this task. She has a workshop coming up it's not this Thursday, but I think it's next Thursday, that's specifically on learning objectives and online teaching. It's hugely beneficial for especially new instructors to kind of get in there with her so that she can help articulate the importance of those learning objectives. Okay, so let's get this started. We've talked a little bit about laying the foundation, the theoretical framework, the literature and evidence that helps support all of these strategies that we could implement. So what does this look like? Well, for example, I've got an example on your screen here. I'll just read it off. One example is that students must have a passport stamp. So this entire course is thematic. It's surrounding world travel or whatever else. Students must have their language passport fully stamped in order to pass the class, okay? So here's what we mean by that. So yes, they're getting grades on the assignments. Yes, their grades are articulating or are converting to kind of their mastery of that particular skill or set of information, but they have to complete all of the assignments. I cannot tell you how many times, especially in my own personal experience, where I have students that may do the bare minimum to pass. And maybe they're submitting their essays to me. I teach English composition. So they're submitting their essays to me, but they don't submit their thesis statements for review. They don't submit their outlines for review. And because of that, their essays are weaker. So how can I encourage them to submit their theses before they move on to their outline? How can I encourage them to create an outline? Some students just hate that. Well, I can gamify that. I gamify it because each of those elements that they submit are essentially earning them a stamp or achievement or badge onto their passport. So it doesn't matter the grade they get, they have to submit. If they don't submit, their passport will not be full, and therefore they will not pass the class. So that is a way to have gamification strategies implemented into your course, but almost even extending the gradebook's importance. So the students have to complete all the assignments in the course. Why? Because that's the only way that they're going to pass. And some instructors don't gamify that at all. They just say, you have to complete all the assignments. But isn't this more fun? Okay, storyboarding. So storyboarding is your opportunity to sit down with your course and really dive into what's going on. So what do you want your students to have experienced in your course? And this is something that requires you to reflect on, what is your discipline? What is your area of focus, area of concentration? So for example, if I am teaching a class, a criminal justice class, maybe my storyline is we are solving a case. And throughout each weekly module, I am teaching them one of those investigation strategies. So I have to tell them how to survey the crime scene. I have to teach them how to interview suspects. I have to teach them how to handle evidence. All of these things are necessary in order for my students to reach those course learning objectives. But my story gives my students a case. We are working a case together. I've set up scenarios. I've set up some different characters that come into play. I've set up the role and purpose of my students, the role and purpose of myself as the instructor, and I get to determine the path that students can take in order to complete my class. That's essentially all storyboarding is. Now, spoiler alert, this is what's going to take a lot of time, figuring out how your course plays out. Now, what doesn't necessarily take a lot of time is actually building it. D2L has given us ways where we can implement some of these strategies relatively quickly. But if we're just starting to kind of haphazardly plug things in, the students are really going to miss out on that opportunity. If there's not a storyboard or if there's not a true purpose for the course, then it's going to seem very hodgepodge together. So you want to make sure that you have your storyboard before you actually go build a house. So it's just like house plans. You got to have your house plans before you build a house. Some of the tools that we're going to be looking at in D2L today is the gradebook, obviously. You can use the gradebook as your students' levels or your students' way to measure or gauge how they're performing in your class. That's the purpose of the gradebook anyways. But you can also use the gradebook to kick off specific release conditions that release information to them. So for example, let's say my student scores below what I would like, below my personal threshold on exam 1. Well, for those students who maybe score below a 75, I need them to make an appointment with the tutoring center and show me proof of the tutoring appointment that they've made. So they have to actually make the appointment and then actually go to the appointment. Now, my other students are not having to do this. So this is kind of like a separate track. This is where my storyboard comes into play. So students who score a 75 or below on exam 1 are presented with this information. Once they complete this information, it's ungraded, so I can't grade them for going, or I'm not going to grade them for going to the tutoring center. I'm not going to grade them or give them points for going to the meeting that they have set up. But I can give them a badge that says, you know what? You may have not scored as well as you had hoped on exam 1, but now you have the hard worker badge or something like that. You have given them that you have acknowledged that they have done something extra. And sometimes just that acknowledgement goes a long way in terms of student persistence and student engagement. If students feel like they still have an opportunity to succeed, their opportunity to persist is increased. Okay. We also have groups in D2L. Groups is a great way to separate your course into smaller components, separate your class list into smaller components. This is a great way to make those larger classes feel more intimate. We are able to have D2L randomly generate our groups. We as instructors are able to manually generate groups. And then using group classifications, we can again restrict content. So members of group 1 are, if I was teaching maybe a cross-listed course, my group A members are all nursing students. My group B members are all public health students, where I'm teaching this interprofessional course. So I have all of my nursing students in group 1. I've grouped them together because their shared experiences and their learned experiences are similar and relatable. I'm grouping my public health students for the same reason. Maybe I'm giving them different objectives and different storylines, and I'm able to kind of harness that all into side of one course. Groups can help us do that. Modules are just folders of information. So we encourage you to section out your course on a weekly basis, just because that's how students approach it. Students are thinking on Sunday night, what do I got to do on that course? And then they just have this understanding that they have until Sunday night to complete the work. That's how their lives are scheduled. That's how our lives are scheduled. Look at our calendars. And so modules give you the opportunity to release packets of information. So you can stagger modules and have them roll out on specific days. You can stagger modules and have them released only if a particular condition is satisfied. So we've got a lot of flexibility there. And now, if you attended the Creating and Embedding Interactive Content webinar, we now have interactive videos. So inside of those interactive videos, we can give students opportunities to choose a path. Maybe my students are going to choose path A, and in path A, they are going to complete one set of assignments. My students that choose path B are going to complete a separate set. But knowing, using that interactive video to kind of split them. Release conditions are so powerful in D2L. Don't see a lot of use of them just because it does take a lot of work and time. But release conditions help you better automate these types of elements, better automate your gamification strategy. Release conditions are visibility restrictions. So release conditions can hide something until a student reaches a certain level or satisfies a specific condition. So maybe you want them to have posted 3 times in the discussion board before this particular news item displays. Or maybe you want only students who have scored a 90 or above to view the level 4 information. So you get to control what is released to students on a visibility level based on criteria that they reach or satisfy. Intelligent agents are automatic notifications that D2L sends out. You can configure these notifications. So for example, going back to my students who scored a 75 or lower on exam 1, I can set up an intelligent agent that says, hi, based on your score for exam 1, I have placed you in the red team. And you know, as the instructor, the red team is going to be charged with making an appointment with the tutoring center and then actually attending that appointment. So in doing that, in saying that, or in notifying the student automatically, you are promoting engagement. So students feel that you're engaged with the course. So, oh, I guess Professor Dubé saw what I made on the exam, and now she's telling me that I am in this group A or this red team. Custom widgets, we're going to look at those. Custom widgets is your opportunity to display information on your homepage. So if you think of your news tool is essentially a widget. It just holds information. You can post updates there, whatever else. You can also use custom widgets to display leaderboards, and I'll show you 2 examples of that. Personalization in D2L. So there's a huge movement for personalized learning. And so what that means is my learning content is in such an approachable, it's very approachable because I'm using my student's name in correspondence. So, excuse me, my students come into my class and my news item says, "Hi, Chelsea. Today we're going to learn about blah, blah, blah." And so when I come in as a student, I'm like, "Oh, there's my name. Okay, so I guess we're all here." It just makes your content feel more approachable. It makes it feel more personal, and you feel better connected to your course. And these are things that you could do automatically and dynamically in things like the news tool, emails, all that good stuff. Okay, so all of this is all well and good, but what does it look and feel like in D2L? So I'm going to show you two different gamification strategies that have very different purposes. The first gamification strategy is actually an example that I use from a separate institution. So this is a class from Minnesota State that they have allowed me to use to showcase their take on gamification in D2L. The second example I'm going to use, and feeling very vulnerable right now, is the gamification elements that I employed in my thesis writing class. So I'll show you the elements that I deployed and the reasons behind that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at that. So on your screen, we're going to bring up the first element. So this is the external class that I'm borrowing from another university. The homepage is relatively simple, but you do notice that to the right here, you have a leaderboard. So again, the students are being called out by name. This is not necessarily any sort of violation or anything. You are communicating simply that student Amber is on level 2. Now, what that means for Amber may be something different than what it means for Mark down here. But regardless, here is that incentive. Like, here's that they're going to instigate or initiate that competitive nature. Students want to be on the top. The leaderboard, this is a custom widget again, can show only the top 3 students. It can show all the students. It's up to you. But spoiler alert, again, this is manual. So this is, I like to coin the term Chelsea-mated. This is not automated. This is all Chelsea-mated. So I am going in here as the instructor and I'm updating this thing every single, whatever, day, week. It's totally up to you. But the impact it could have on my students is huge. So again, something to explore here. And then I'll show you how to create that in just a second. So let's go ahead and let's just jump into the thing. Let's just see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and click on content. Optionally, my students would click here to begin. So they're going to come to my Start Here module. Okay? So automatically, I see a couple of things. I know where I'm supposed to begin. As a student, I'm supposed to begin in this particular module here. Instead of my week 1, 2, 3, 4, I have levels. Okay? Now, at the end of my levels, I have a couple of other things. I have this boss level, and like right off the bat, I'm very competitive by nature. So automatically, I'm like, okay, definitely doing that. And then Easter egg basket. I have no idea what Easter basket is. So just curiosity alone is going to let me know, or just going to lead me to showing me. Then I have some supplemental materials here. So let's start up at the top. So a couple of important things about this particular example. Number one, so far we have not incorporated any sort of difficult thing. We have altered naming conventions. I say this a lot in some of our course building workshops. Naming conventions make or break a course. If they're consistent, if they're intuitive, there's so much that can be said about naming conventions. So all that's being done here is simply altering your naming conventions. You know, assumingly, that level 1 is week 1. So my students are progressing from one level to the next I want to encourage them to progress by using the word level instead of module or week. Just simple things like that, and can really make a huge difference in your students' persistence in your course. If I open up my syllabus, I right off the bat tell the students, listen, I'm going to be using some gamification strategies in this course. This is not a secret. This is not some sort of like weird psychological test, anything like that. But I want to be clear in that this course is going to operate a lot differently than some of your other courses. So transparency is key here, okay? So in this, the instructor has chosen to use the gradebook again in a non-conventional way. So the gradebook, yes, is points-based, but look at this. So it says, rather than grades, you will receive experience points. And so what that means is, this is essentially what we do anyways, but it sounds more engaging. I want to receive experience points. You get 1 experience point for this. You get 2 experience points for that. You get 3 experience points for this, that, or the other. We do this already. If you have a rubric, you're giving your students points based on their level of achievement. In this class, students are receiving experience points, that sounds much fancier than grades, based on their performance. It's the same thing presented differently. Okay, you have all of these naming conventions. So you have, and these are your levels of achievement here. So your social, heroic, epic, any of these things. And we'll look at how those are implemented. You then have guilds. So these are groups in D2L. So your group or guild, so this is very, it reminds me of Zelda. Each student is placed in a guild, fancy name for a group, and guilds will perform heroic and social quests together. Okay, so let's break this down into what they're actually doing. I'm going to put my students in groups, and they're going to do some group projects. Now, if you tell your students, hi, I'm going to break you up into groups, and you're going to work together as a group on a group project, your students are going to be like, oh, great, thanks. But if I tell my students, I'm going to put you in a guild, and you are going to perform social quests, I don't know. I may dread it less as a student. You never know, okay? It's something to explore. And then you have all of the other policies, different things like that. The next element in the course, I'm going to move this over. The next element in your course is just, again, transparency. What is it about gamification? So look at this. For this course, we're going to move away from traditional academic language and more toward gaming terms. So this course, the storyboard for this course is naming conventions. So I'm making my course feel like a game by transposing my academic language that students can sometimes feel is inapproachable or stuffy or not fun or any of those other words. And instead, I'm going to use game-based terminologies. Instead of groups, it's guilds. Instead of grades, it's experience points. And already, my course feels more approachable. Now, full disclosure again, this is not going to be appropriate for every level. Not sure this would be appropriate in maybe like my doctoral course. But you never know. Okay, I'm going to progress on to the next item. And this is the learning guide. So again, this is how to play the game. You cannot gamify your course unless you tell the students how to play the game. This has to be exceptionally clear. So when we talk about assignment directions, I'm always harping about assignment directions. Make sure that they're clear. Make sure that you have provided enough scaffolding for your students in order to complete it. All that fun stuff. A gamification learning guide is essential. You cannot have your students floundering around your course just because you've changed some names. You have to tell them directly and explicitly what the names are, how they're going to participate in the course, what your intentions are, how each level works, how each guild works, all that stuff. But, you know, you do that anyways. In an online course especially, you are presented with an opportunity to kind of make or break your students' experience. If you have a really nice introduction video that tells the students, hey guys, here's how my course is going to work. My weeks actually begin on Tuesdays and follow or go through the following Monday. So each Tuesday you have this to do. Each Thursday you need to do this, and then your major assignment is due on Monday nights at 10 p.m. Because that's like a non-traditional week, I'm having to purposefully tell my students, this is how the class works. This gamification learning guide is no different than that. I'm going to hop back over to my table of contents and search around for some other things. So again, we have some how to navigate this course. This is hugely beneficial for any and all online courses and not just courses that have been gamified. But now let's go to one of the levels. So I'm going to click on the first level here. And it says right off the bat, in order to level up, you must meet the following learning objectives. You must explore the technology, define educational technology, and then identify ways in which technology may improve education. I have a checklist to give my students. So I need them to do this, that, and the other. I also have provided them links to everything that I've referenced in the checklist. So notice that I have the checklist. I need to watch these two things or link out to these two things. And then after I have watched those things, I'm going to come back and teach us something. I need to learn how to use the tool and create a mini lesson on this tool. Okay, so again, it's taking those teaching strategies and putting them to practice. Students can be presented with information to read. Students can reflect on the information, but having to teach someone else information always encourages them to kind of dig a little bit deeper. Like, I need to know the intricacies so that when I'm teaching this, I can answer questions. Okay, so we have so pretty simple right here, not really that far removed from what we would recommend in a traditional online course. And so here's where the gamification elements come in. Okay, so here's some suggestions. And so here we have, so this is like a rubric, right? So if I am a student, I know that I'm going to get one experience point if I just post instructions. But if I maybe post with screenshots, instructions, and implications, I get 4. And then if I post a screencast, so if I record a video of myself teaching my new educational technology learning tool that includes instructions, implications, and an example, I get 10 points. So as the instructor, I will accept anything. Essentially, I have gotten my students to complete the assignment. I'm going to give them from 1 to 10 points. But using it in this presentation manner encourages my students. They say, oh, wait a minute, I don't want 1 point. Or maybe, you know, they've had a really busy week and they're trying to evaluate. You know, on this particular one, I'm going to actually go for this kind of 4 experience points, post with screenshots, because I just don't have the capacity right now to talk about learning how to screencast or something like that. So I'm able to evaluate as a student what I have the capacity to do versus the points that I'm going to receive for submitting that type of work. Okay. So again, we have every assignment, you give them that point distribution. So if you, again, here we go with how much do students want to earn. So if you post 1 text reply, you get 1 point. But if you post all replies with embedded videos, you get 5 points. So imagine the range of submissions you'll get. Now, as the instructor, that range of submissions is good because it feels much less laborious and repetitive. And you know the feeling you get after you've assigned a really lengthy paper, and then it comes time for you to grade that paper, and you're just faced with several lengthy papers to grade. The grading process there is like, man, it's a struggle sometimes. So encouraging students using this point distribution diversifies their submissions and also makes your grading experience a little bit, it could make it better for you as well. So again, we have several different elements that you can use in your class. These are, again, nothing too exceptional. This particular example uses the same discussion board that we always use in class, but instead they have placed this point distribution. Now, what does this look like for the instructor? Well, you're going to have to grade these things. You're grading them anyways. You can always create a rubric that gives students like that point breakdown. Now, if you wanted to add some other elements into this in terms of like quality of post, not just post, like this is concentrating on post type. If you want to also do like some post quality, things like that, you can embed that into your rubric too. Okay, so I'm going to go to this boss level. Now, to beat the boss level, so this is kind of the ultimate goal. So you want your students to all be encouraged to persist to this level. And sometimes in a class like this, you have this culminating effort. You have to have collected all of these things that you have submitted and present them as your finalist or one of your final pieces of your classroom submissions. So the boss level is basically a culmination of all of the graded work that you've submitted in this class thus far. So you have to have a portfolio that includes all of these items. And then you would give the student the opportunity to resubmit that. Now, if I go to my Easter egg basket, so again, these are things that are deposited throughout the course, you are able to kind of gather them just as you would in an Easter egg hunt. Just deposit them throughout the course. Your students are gathering them and they're placing into either a repository, something additional. Okay, so all of these Easter eggs are helping you build your portfolio to reach the boss level of this particular course. In terms of displaying that information to students, this particular course setup is divided into assignment types. So you have those social quests. Again, the students were inside of groups and then they were participating in their group discussions. So you have some social quests, you have your historic or your heroic quests, all of the quest breakdowns that were mentioned in your syllabus. Now, like I said at the beginning of the webinar, gamification is more work on the instructor. So these are the activities that you're going to be charged with grading. So just be honest enough with yourself about what you have, what you're willing to do, what you have the capacity to do in terms of time allotment, all of that stuff. Now this course, the examples in this course are pretty straightforward. They're using the discussion board, so in the traditional sense, they're using group and non-group discussions. They're using Dropbox assignments, both group and non-group or individual Dropbox assignments. So they're using all of the conventional tools. All they've done is repackage it in a non-conventional naming strategy. That strategy lends itself to a particular gaming system or gaming something, and the students are encouraged by taking away the academic kind of discourse, the academic terminology, and being replaced with game-based technology or game-based terminology. They're encouraged to participate and complete the assignments. So nothing too complex here in terms of setup. Okay, the course that I chose to deploy some gamification elements was a thesis writing course. So in this course, the learning problem that I identified, was number one, students at this level, so this is a 4,000 level course, senior level undergraduate students. Students at this level may not have had experience writing a larger paper. So in this particular class, they have to write a 20-page thesis, complete with academic sources, maybe some interviews if their program or project lends itself to that. And students seem to kind of face that 20-page paper and are immediately defeated. They don't know how to approach a paper of that length. Maybe in this particular degree program, they've not had to complete that kind of assignment. So one of the first learning problems was students were defeated by the assignment page length. I didn't have any control of that. So I had to rebrand that packaging in a different way. The second learning problem was that you know, students in this particular class, they come from all walks of life. Maybe they've visited several different schools. They have taken a couple different sets of classes, so they've not really had a consistent curriculum guiding them through. So sometimes their writing mechanics have suffered because of that. Maybe they had some time away from college, and they were reapproaching the classroom, and they needed some writing mechanics refreshers. A third learning problem was that students were unfamiliar with how to approach an oral presentation. So one of the items that they had to complete in this class was almost like a defense, like a mini defense. They had to basically present on their paper, give a justification as to why they completed this particular project or topic, how they went about completing the project, what their research process looked like, basically a defense. Students were largely unfamiliar or uncomfortable with that process because they had been in online classes. They had not really had to present in either video capacity or in-person capacity. And so I needed to make sure of three things. I needed to make sure that they persisted through to write the paper and meet the page length. I needed to make sure that their writing mechanics were supportive and like I could see an improvement across the semester in terms of their writing skills, whether it's like paragraph foundations or something like that. Third learning problem was a lack of presentation skills. So I needed my students, just in addition to them completing this thesis course, to walk away with knowing how to break apart a larger project into smaller components, knowing how to navigate writing components, and knowing how to present and defend a presentation in person and virtually. So those were not a part of the grading distribution that I inherited. So what I did was a couple of things. First, I put the leaderboard front and center. I used the naming convention of leveling up. So in addition to my required elements, my students could level up or progress to the next level or increase their grade, essentially, by completing particular level up opportunities that I have scattered throughout the class. Now, these level up opportunities were worth standard bonus points. So if you completed this particular level up opportunity, you received 5 bonus points. If you completed this particular level up opportunity, you received 15 bonus points. At the end of the course, you could earn up to 65 bonus points. That is massive, okay? Now, granted, this course was worth like 610 points. So like 60 points was, you know, not that much in the grand scheme of things. But it felt like a lot. Like if I were to tell my students, and you could earn up to 65 bonus points in this course, they were like, wow. Okay, so they were immediately encouraged that they could make a better grade than what they could have if the bonus points were not a factor, okay? So a couple of things that I implemented. First, in the content tool, oh, wrong one. See here, let me go back to 8. Yeah. Okay, so first in my course, I placed inside of my assignments folder, I placed a leveling up module. This level up module, in addition to the information that I placed in the syllabus, identified and explained what the function of these particular activities were. Like, why did they exist and why should the students care about them? I gave some explanations here, and then I presented them with each of the level up points. Now, the level up opportunities were attached to my graded assessments. So, for example, they had to complete an annotated bibliography. That was the assignment. I was going to grade the annotated bibliography based on its quality and merit. The level up opportunity for the annotated bibliography comes where if all of their citations are correct. So citations are another learning problem that I identified. Students just are very unsure about how to navigate that, especially my undergrad students. If their annotated bibliography citations did not contain any errors, so I'm talking periods, italics, all that stuff, I gave them, or I distributed badges. I also gave them or handed out bonus points for that particular thing. So this is far going above the just simply submitting the annotated bibliography. Obviously, as the instructor, it is my intention for them to look up the citation and then present the citation correctly. I mean, obviously, but students are consistently kind of missing that. So this was an incentive. The way that I chose to distribute that incentive was two ways. First, in my grade book, I was able to create a section of level up bonus points, and I then entered a numeric score. Based on the scores I entered in this particular, or in these particular grade items, inside of my awards tool, I submitted my badge. So if they were able to submit an annotated bibliography that did not contain any sort of citation or any sort of MLA issues with their source citations, then they received the MLA Citation Slayer badge and they progressed to level 1. Now, if they submitted any of these other things, so for example, they were awarded a badge each time they reached a paper length benchmark. So the paper's 20 pages, I divided it by 5, and I assigned 5 pages per 4 weeks. So each week I was saying, we are on week 3. By now, you should have written 3.5 pages or so, 3 to 4 pages, because they know that in weeks 4, 8, 12, and 16, they have level checkpoints. So I had initiated some level checkpoints. So for example, in my level 4, I have a course milestone 1. This is just a simple checklist that says, okay, let's see where you are. By this point in the semester, you should have completed 1/4 of the course content and assignments. So let's see where we're at. So the students can open up this checklist and they say, okay, I completed the class intro discussions, I completed these 2 things, I completed my annotated bibliography, and then bam, right here, at least 5 pages of my thesis written and ready for review. I may or may not have that just yet. Now, my required assignments are require them to submit a 10-page draft to me, and that's it. That's all they're required to do. So this 5 pages is optional. So how can I incentivize them to submit this, to continue writing? Well, I can incentivize them by, I chose to do this in the Dropbox. Each of their progress points, either 5, 10, 15, or 20 pages, I had them submit to the online writing center. I worked with the tutoring center that's here in the library, and I said, okay, I am using some gamification strategies in my class. My students are going to be submitting 5, 10, 15, and 20 pages to your writing tutors. The student responsibility was to create the appointment, attend the writing session, and to give me a transcript of their interactions with the writing coach. Okay, so not only were they encouraged by receiving bonus points, they were encouraged because they were getting feedback from multiple people. So giving feedback from, sometimes instructor feedback can be a little bit hard to, sometimes it's hard to approach for a student, especially if you go and you see all kinds of red on your paper. You are immediately turned off. But if you're working with a peer, working with a writing tutor in a more casual environment, and in this case, an online environment, we do have online writing tutoring available, the student felt like that was more approachable. Some of my students actually identified a writing tutor that they continued to go back to. They would personally request a specific writing tutor, and my student and the tutor worked together the entire semester to kind of refine some of their, some pieces and parts of their paper. So each time they reached a milestone, they received a badge and bonus points. Now, in these level up opportunities, I did not grade for quality of work. I simply graded for persistence. So did they reach 5 pages? Did they reach 10 pages, 15, 20? My thought behind that was they are getting feedback from the writing tutor. I'm giving them, I did, for each student for 10 pages, I did written feedback and a video overview. I said, okay, here's where you are. Let's talk about how you can go, or how you can get to 20 pages here. Let's talk about some strategies that you can implement, things like that. So the feedback that I received here was really positive. First of all, students had no idea that this service ever even existed, and they had no idea how to sign up for it. So what I did was I created an instructional video, posted it in the news tool that said, here's how to create a virtual appointment with a writing tutor at ETSU. Walked through the process. I attended a meeting, so in my instructional video, I attended the meeting with the writing tutor and then showed them what I needed from them. So I needed their transcript. So they just couldn't like say, they couldn't just tell me, yes, I went to the writing center. They had to show proof of that entire meeting. Typically they were an hour. So I needed the transcript. So I walked through the entire process of how to identify, how to do the assignment, or how to make the appointment, how to attend the appointment, and how to send the transcript to me so that they could earn their level up points. All of these things factored into the grade book. All of the awards that were given that I showed you earlier, they were automatically signed or automatically sent. So as soon as the student submitted progress, either 5, 10, 15 pages or so, as soon as I entered that grade, the system would kick off and say, okay, they've achieved these level up points, they're getting this badge. So the next time a student signs on to the learning environment, they say receive a notification, full D2L panel that says, congratulations, you've made some progress. You have 5 pages of your 20-page paper submitted. Way to go, keep up the great work. An encouraging message, personalized, and it really went a long way. Now, for my other gamification strategies, I wanted to give them opportunities to get in front of the camera. So this is more than just writing the discussion. Some of my discussions were easier or harder than, they just ranged in terms of difficulty. My proposal here. Now, the proposal for this paper was very short. It's like a 1 to 2 page kind of thing. And it was really nice, but it wasn't getting my students, it wasn't preparing them to defend their paper. So for the level up opportunity here, I wanted to say, okay, I need you to post a 5-minute video that covers the information shared. So you still have to submit your written work. I need to get my hands on your writing so that I can help you with your mechanics, but I also want to get you in front of the camera. I want you to be comfortable so that at the end, when you're giving your final defense, that's not the first time that you're getting in front of the camera to talk about your work. So throughout the discussion board, my level up opportunities consisted of getting in front of the camera. So for example, on down here, this research reflection, I wanted them to post a 3-minute video reflection. Again, this is their second opportunity to get in front of the camera before they're graded on it. In addition, I created a peer review. Peer reviews in D2L are, it's not the best platform for that type of activity. There's no way to do like a double-blind peer review. We get that question a lot. But for students who feel comfortable submitting to work to their class peers, this is their opportunity to submit work in a safe space, but for also that work to be incentivized. So we had submitting a peer review, submitting videos, going to the writing center, and these were all not required elements that helped tackle the learning problems that I identified in this class. The setup for these was small, I found this image on Google and I just used it consistently. So anytime the student saw this image, they were alerted that there was a particular activity that they could complete in this class that would award them additional bonus points or badges or both. Okay, the leaderboard, I kept front and center on the homepage. Let me go back to my training 5 here. I kept front and center on the homepage so that at any point in time the student can come in here and they see full screen what the class standing was. They see how they ranked in terms of level, and just the level rank was determined by their position on the number of level up opportunities they completed. So the level rank of 1, that student's in first place in the class, that student completed the most level up opportunities, and by doing so earned this many points. So that was a way to kind of see not only I was here in level, but I lacked this particular point distribution to increase to the next level. So this was a way that I could show students and just kind of encourage some competition between the students. I will say that in every single class reflection and every single defense that the students completed, each student mentioned the level up opportunities, specifically knowing or just being able to know that online writing tutoring was a thing was huge for them. They remarked about using it for their other classes, and they loved that component of it. They also, I felt like the students were far more comfortable inside of their thesis defense. They were more comfortable because the technology wasn't as big of a burden or a barrier as it would have been if my other assignments did not include any sort of video requirement. So I felt like largely it was successful. I will also say that students did reach the paper length goal in the class. Each of the students who made it to the end of the class, and it's common to always have some people who don't persist. That's just the nature of it. But for the students who completed the course, they all exceeded the 20-page paper requirement. And so I was really pleased about that. I'm still going to go back. The writing quality was still not necessarily where I want it to be, so that's the learning problem that I've continued to identify. I feel comfortable with this type of strategy encouraging persistence in terms of page length, and I feel comfortable that this strategy handled the technology barriers really well. So it helped students negotiate technological barriers. But it didn't necessarily improve writing mechanics as much as I wanted. So going forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create writing mechanics games or practice exercises so that students are able to explore how to first recognize grammatical errors and then how to correct grammatical errors. Like for me personally, passive voice, I don't like my students to use passive voice. So how can they identify a sentence that's utilizing passive voice and then how to correct that passive voice sentence and convert it into a more active voice sentence. So that's something that I still have to do. In the last couple minutes of this webinar, I just want to go over how to do some things that you may be unfamiliar with at this point. So I feel pretty confident that most users know how to create content. They know how to create discussion boards, drop boxes, bonus items in the gradebook. Two unconventional uses of D2L that I've explored here is the use of a widget on the homepage and the use of awards. So I want to quickly go through those two things in D2L before we end with resources and kind of how to get started on gamifying your own course. In order to create this leaderboard, one of the ways that you can do that is using this Edit Course menu. So this is our course administration menu. If I click on Edit Course, I'm able to go to Home Pages. And then here on Home Pages, I would create a copy of the default. Now, if you notice, you're not able to change or edit the course default in any way, but you can copy it, which is what I did here. Once I copied it, I made a couple of changes. The first change that I made was that I chose a one-panel layout. So if you're looking at a traditional D2L course, you see that it's a two-panel or a two-column layout. We have this larger section on the left, and then some tools listed in a column on the right. I knew that I wanted my leaderboard to span the entire width. I just feel like that's more visually demanding. So I changed my layout from the basic, which is our standard, to one. I then scrolled down and I was able to create or to order my elements here. These elements are called widgets. Widgets in D2L is simply space where information resides. You see that the news widget is here, the updates widget, the calendar widget. These are all by default already on your news tool or on your course homepage. The new element was this leaderboard. I needed a space where I could display my leaderboard. And this is, again, I just want to be very transparent, not automated. This is something that I went in and edited every single time I updated grades. So I would grade a student's level up opportunities or submissions and then reflected those new scores in my leaderboard widget every time, whether that was daily, weekly, whatever the student submissions looked like. In order to do that, I have to save and close out of here. I have to go to my Widgets tab. So again, I'll walk through that again. From Edit Course, I clicked Home Pages. And after I made a copy of my home page, after I changed it to one panel, I come back to this page and shows Widgets. Widgets, again, is your opportunity to create information. And all it presents you with is a white box. So if I create a widget here, I can name it Webinar Widget. The description does not display, so you can feel free to leave that empty. The Content tab is where your information is going to reside. So anything I put in here is going to show to students. So I can say, hello everyone. Maybe I can insert a picture of something here. I can go to my computer. I can see what kind of pictures. I don't think I have any pictures saved here. If I did, I could insert a picture here. What I did for the leaderboard that was displayed on the homepage was I created it in Word and then copy and pasted it in. It's not very fancy or hard at all. I didn't have to do any fancy code, anything like that. So I just created it in Word, you can create it in PowerPoint, whatever you want, just copied and pasted it in here. So once I was happy with my widget, I go back to my home pages, and inside of my copied home page, I wanted to add a widget down here at the bottom. And from here, I can show my custom widgets. So this is, custom widgets are widgets that you create. So I'm going to check my webinar widget and add it. And I wanted actually this to be at the top. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag it all the way up. So now I have my webinar widget here. I can save and close. I'm going to acknowledge that my copied homepage is set as active. Active means that's what's showing on the course homepage. So if I go back here, my new widget displays here. I can quickly edit it by clicking Edit this widget, and I can hop back into this Content tab and make the appropriate change. Maybe this student actually earned 10 more points, so 39 points. Save and close, navigate back to Course Home, and my new information is readily available. So this information is static. It's not dynamic, doesn't change automatically, none of that stuff. So just be very, I just want to be very clear in that this is very much instructor driven. But you can include any information in this widget. I would definitely reserve widgets for extra or additional information. I would not include any sort of required information, like don't put your syllabus in a random widget, don't put your required course content, PDFs or PowerPoint presentations in your widgets, none of that. All required content should live in your content tool. That way you can track it, all that good stuff. But these are fun ways to kind of diversify your class a little bit. Second thing I want to show you is awards. So awards is found inside of the A to Z menu. And so when you open up awards and click on course awards, You can add awards to your class. You've got two options. You can create an award. So this can be Chelsea's webinar award. You can add a description. My award type is one of two options. I always like badge because a badge is presented in like a more graphic form. For those of you who have completed the online instructor training, you should receive a certificate when you log in the next time after satisfying that instructor orientation goal. You can restrict the availability of this award to make it available to all the courses or specifically just this course. You can control the expiration date if you wanted to do that. And then you can create or choose from an image. So if I click from existing library, I like this, let's see here, this handshake icon, I like that. So I'm just gonna select it. And then I get to put my information. So I'm the person issuing this award. You can reach me at our website and you can reply to me by my email address. So I'm going to save and close this award. So a couple of things that I can do. I can go back in here and edit my properties of this award. So if I wanted to automate this award, let's say that I don't necessarily want to come in here and babysit this thing every week. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create a release condition that says, whenever my student, let's see, I'm going to put grade value on a grade item. If my student receives a grade on assignment 1 that's something maybe, let's say 80%. So I can click create. Full disclosure, the operators that D2L uses are seemingly in the reverse of what you would think. So if you choose something and you intended for it to be greater than, it's probably calculating as less than. So just be sure to test these options so that you get the experience that you want. So I can create something that says when a student receives an 80, so if I receive like a 79 on an assignment, so I've entered a 79 for a student, automatically they will receive this badge the next time they log into the environment. So I can click save. So automatically I have I have now automated this badge. So I can ensure that my class is going to go off without a hitch and that anytime the students receive an 80 or below, I think it was the condition, yeah, an 80 or less on assignment 1, this automation is going to kick off and award them a badge for assignment 1. This is only going to happen one time. It's kind of a one and done type thing. If I wanted to manually issue an award, I simply select a student and choose issue, and I'm able to choose the awards that are available for this particular class list. I can choose Chelsea's webinar award. I give the student the reason, and then choose issue or click issue. And then when my ATS 6 comes in, this student will receive a badge labeled whatever it was, Chelsea's webinar award. So we can look to see kind of what that looks like here. I'm not sure it's gonna, I've given it enough time, but we can see. So automatically I come in, and as you can see here, D2L gives my student notification. It says, oh, congratulations, and then it would say Chelsea instead of ATS 6 training. You have received the Chelsea's webinar award issued to participants who have survived this webinar. You completed the work in this particular course. We knew that the evidence was that you survived, the issue date, and the issuer. I can close this. I can view all of my awards, so I can come back here and see all of my badges and certificates that I've earned in this class. I can click on it. I can look at it again. I can print it if I wanted to brag to my peers that I received awards for surviving a webinar. All of that fun stuff. So those are just kind of fun elements that you can implement in your class relatively easily to help along your gamification strategies. Okay, so let's end this by giving you some resources. And again, I'll put this this information in the chat at the end of the webinar, as well as in the description field of the YouTube video. D2L itself has some really awesome gamification repositories. So this is just examples of ways that D2L suggests that you employ gamification strategies inside of Brightspace. Some of the information that I collected when preparing for this webinar, I retrieved from Minnesota State University. They have a really great game-based learning repository where they have worksheets and different other strategies. Michigan State was the epidemiology example that I referenced. It's truly, truly awesome. And then we also have from training industry, there's again another repository of gamification elements. So I recommend that you check out each one of these if you would like to explore some more options on how to embed or incorporate some elements into your D2L classes, or what it would look like if you did. Definitely encourage you to check out this Michigan State Zombie project. This is truly incredible. Now, full disclosure, they've probably had like videographers and video editors heavily involved in the creation of that, but it is really impressive. But some of these resources are pretty handy. I'll stick around after the webinar to answer any questions that have come up in the chat, anything like that. If you want to see something demonstrated, if you just have some questions, or if you just want to talk about gamification, talk about game-based learning, anything like that, happy to take those questions. You're also able to reach out to us if you have any questions, if you want to explore some things, need a little bit of help in D2L to get some of these things going. So thanks for attending. I hope you found the information we covered helpful. You're encouraged to kind of go back and diversify some of your course content by incorporating some of these strategies into your own D2L courses. So thanks again for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.